Welcome to the Shifting People podcast, where we go deep into the weeds with leaders on the front lines of people management in the service industry. We interview the best minds in HR and talent acquisition, along with owner-operators, franchisees, and general managers to bring you real insights that you can actually apply in your business today. I'm your co-host, Williamson.
And I'm Kathleen McDonough, and it's time to get to work. Today we have Ronita McDonald, Senior Analyst of Culture, Opportunity, and Belonging at Yum Brands. Ronita, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
We're excited too.
So excited to chat with you. Yeah, because you got to this very big title by way of many different experiences and unexpected roles. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. So first things first, I will tell you that I was supposed to be a pediatrician. And then I went to school and I was doing my pre-med, and then in chemistry, they started making up math. I said, listen, this isn't for me. So I became a psychology major. And the running joke was like, you could drop a book out of a window and hit a psychology major on the head. So I was like, I better find a specialization that's going to work for me here. Yeah. And once I found organizational psychology, I just fell in love. So I call myself an OD nerd. And from there, really just looking at how work and people come together to make awesome things for our customers, for our consumers, is really the driving force behind what I do. It's all about the people. So I started in customer service because when I graduated, it was during a recession, one of them. I won't tell you which one. You won't age me that way. But during the recession, so they were like, you need to just find something that's going to get you solvent. So I ended up in customer service. I started answering phones and helping people try to find their commercials, if you can believe it. And then from there, I moved on to, actually, there was a layoff. So our department was cut in half. So that was very depressing and unexpected. And then I moved on to work for JCPS, which is the school system here in Louisville, Kentucky. So Jefferson County Public Schools. And from there, I was working in the classroom, aiding teachers and students, helping them figure out what they needed to do to increase their literacy and their skills and develop so that they could move on and advance. And then from there, I ended up in Metro government. And I know it's like, how did you, what? I don't know. So from there, I ended up in Metro government working as a training coordinator and an HR coordinator in the finance arm of Office of Management and Budget. Do not ask me to touch your books. No, thank you. But from that role, I ended up writing a lot of policies because without policies, the procedures and the work that we do needs something to hinge back on. And the training needs to connect to that policy to help people actually execute well. So that's why I learned that even though people don't think policies are fun, you do need them, and you need them to be well written and comprehensive so that people can execute on them well. And then I moved over to KFC, became a training coordinator there. So I was supporting a lot of the field roles in some of their, how do you make mashed potatoes, all the way to how do you run an effective meeting and do an end of day and a start of day. Some of those are some operational terms that maybe everyone doesn't know, but if you're a franchisee or you're in the biz. And then I moved over to organizational development, did a lot of people development, team development, leadership developments, and also onboarding. And now I'm in the culture, opportunity, and belonging team. And there we look at creating opportunities, helping people get to where they want to be is really what drives all that I do.
Love it. Love it. What a journey. It's so interesting because it's definitely, your career path has been one of those like very non-linear paths if you just looked at the titles, and as you described the roles, but then there is a very logical pathway. It seems like you've likely brought many pieces along the way. I can imagine, especially even starting in customer service, that experience has probably really helped you be effective where you are today.
For sure. One of the things that customer service actually taught me was to not just think about what you need done, but also think about how to help people get what they need so that they can be effective. As I said, we did commercials. So people probably think like I turn on the TV and in between my favorite show, there are those things that I go get popcorn during. But commercials are big business. And so if the commercial is supposed to air during this prime time slot at 8 p.m. and it's not there for them to air it, there's a lot of freaking out that happens in the background, let's be honest. And with that, we were the ones who got the phone call of, where's this spot? We need it in the lineup. What are you all doing over there? So what we had is the company had personalized accounts for each of the ABC, NBC, all of these different big stations. And we would say, okay, we're going to check with our account managers. But what I would do is after we've gotten the crisis averted, I would say, hey, do you have a couple of seconds? Let me show you how you can actually find these in your account. Let me show you how you can actually pull these yourselves. Because sometimes that was the issue. It wasn't that they didn't have it, it's that they did not know how to access it. And so when you think about training, that fits right into the training role of, do they have the information they need? Do they have access to be able to get to it? And then are they able to actually use it in the way that it's designed?
Fascinating. That makes so much sense. Also sounds like, yes, that role is likely pretty high stakes. I can imagine people are paying a lot of money. It's probably someone's job on the line to make sure it got aired, and you're right in the line of fire.
Think about Super Bowl, think about back to school, think about Black Friday. We had several touch points during the year where it was all hands on deck.
My goodness, yeah. And it's so interesting because it dovetails into, like, we've talked to some other folks a little bit, but there's a really interesting thing that happens, especially in restaurants, like in stores, right? People start in these roles, whether it's a cashier at KFC or in a restaurant as a server or something like that. And there's often this idea that's a side income job, but then you'll go do, it's almost like there's an idea that there's no crossover. All of those like foundational skills are what can then you will actually bring those into other roles. It's just not as obvious. Yeah.
So I think one of the things that I really learned to take with me is, even if this isn't the dream job that you want right now, there's always something that you can take and you can learn and you can build upon with you in your next role, in your future, even if you're completely changing industries. That is one of the things that when we talk about transformational skills, those are the things that are not necessarily tied to a specific role, but you can take with you. And I like to say your toolbox, and you can actually grow from that in so many different ways and actually expand where you are. And that'll help you like grow so much faster.
No kidding. Yeah, yeah. Tell us a little bit more about how you think about learning, because there's obviously jumping into new roles, there's a forced learning, but you also, the way you speak about learning and everything, it seems like you're a lifelong learner. Like you have this mindset of, I want to learn how to do this, and then you will just pick it up. But how did you get into that mindset, and like how did you develop that?
So you might have heard curiosity killed the cat. I don't particularly like that phrasing, but I do think that there is something so interesting about something that makes you curious, something that captures your attention that you want to learn more. And instead of me being like, that's not going to serve me right now, or I don't have time for that, I try to just lean into it. And so from that, I mean, it could be an opportunity at work. So some things that I ended up being on projects that I never would have been in the room for is because I was like, oh, I heard you're working on this project. Like, I'd like to learn more about that. And they're like, sure, we'll invite you to the meeting. And from there, I got to learn about more aspects of the business, operation side. I got to learn more about finance. Now, listen, I said, don't give me your checkbook. But from the perspective of close of year, in like all these different things, books close, I learned about a lot of these things. And my biggest thing is knowledge is potential power. So it doesn't do you any good unless you're using it. So it's just like you going into a library, and nowadays we probably go on Google or Chat GPT, but you go into a library, there's all these books, there's all this information, but it does you no good to just walk into the library. You got to read it, and then you got to take it out with you and apply it. And that's where learning actually unlocks so much inside of us that we can reach things that we never thought we could before.
Yeah, yeah. And it's one of those things that I can imagine too, like it builds momentum, right? There is like we're so like dopamine addicted now, right? But when you learn something and you actually feel like, oh, I've now applied this, there is like a mental like reward system, right? Our brains do learning things. You just have to shift in that and start the momentum, right? And
A
start learning.
100%. When I started at KFC as a trainer, they wanted us to film nuggets. So think the chicken business, we got nuggets, bite-sized micro learnings, nuggets. And it was so interesting because I was like trying to learn how to film and different things, But when I got into that role, I was supposed to already be up to snuff. And I got on Udemy and I got on YouTube and I started watching YouTube, not from the perspective of just enjoying the content, but oh, look at how they brought that in. Oh, this is really intriguing how it's drawing me in and how it's leading me in. And so then I started incorporating that into some of the videos that I had created. And I didn't realize that it was so different from some of my colleagues. But when it came time when we had an intern, I was like, hey, if you want to shadow me for a day on a filming set, we go into a KFC restaurant and I'll show you some of the different things that I do so you can see if you can pick it up and take it with you where you end up on your journey.
Super smart. Yeah.
Taking inspiration from kind of everything you do, right? Like in every day. And I would assume going through other drive-throughs, going through interacting with anyone in your everyday life can bring it into like you teaching in those nuggets. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I asked a question, but then I forgot it.
No, I think, yeah, the nuggets are really interesting. And I think like one of the sort of interesting pieces there too is like this small format, like digestible learning, which I think a lot of restaurants and then at a higher level even, they forget the importance of often it's much more successful to give people these like little sprinkles along the way rather than here's 5 hours of material, like start to end.
You have hit the nail on the head there. When I first started, it was before COVID. You sit in an 8 hour orientation. And really, what I learned from that is that I didn't retain very much. It wasn't until I was in a situation where that information was relevant that some of it started to come back to me. But in general, if you asked me what this conference was or who these partners were, what they did, I deer in the headlights, completely lost. And so now that we know that trends are shifting toward shorter attention spans, more immediate gratification, how are we actually able to service the needs of the user, not service ourselves as the people who are putting out the content, but actually service the needs of the user to maximize the impact?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And I'm curious, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, but
Okay.
if you're someone who's coming into a role where there's nothing in place
Mhm.
for learning development, career, any of those things, right? Where would you think people should start, right? If you have really nothing, like a lot of franchises, smaller franchises, really all they have is those lists, right? Those opening lists, the closing lists, the like ingredients, recipes, but they don't necessarily have good materials for people to do that sort of ongoing learning. But where do you think there's the biggest opportunities or biggest wins if you were coming in kind of blank slate?
I think one of the things that is very important that is often overlooked is orientation and onboarding. We just want to get them as solvent as possible, hands on the line as quickly as possible. But what we've learned from adult learning theory is that adults learn best when they understand the why. How many times have you been in a training? They say, do it this way. And it's almost like back to the parents because I said so, or because I've been doing this so many years. They won't say that usually at work because I said so, but because I've been doing this so many years. But how do we actually bring people along with us so that they understand and then they become ambassadors and champions of the work that needs to be done and the way that it needs to be done to be most efficient? So I would say, one, do not overlook onboarding. And I'm not just talking about your mission statement and your vision statement, but also looking at the why behind the work that you do, appreciating those individuals who come in day out, making sure that they understand the reasoning and the rationale behind the heat temperatures, the cooling temperatures, things that feel tedious, but there's so much behind it of how we want to protect our customers and keep our people safe. There's so much there that we just don't really fully connect the dots on sometimes because we're like, I just need you to pack really quickly and I need you to use this computer efficiently so that we can get the people through the line. And we've got to remember that all of this really incorporates into a good customer experience that's going to keep people coming back. So let's
Mm,
not overlook that.
yeah, I love that. Just as you were saying that, it reminds me of like my ice cream store days when I used to run an ice cream store. And it took me so long to actually figure out how to simplify this for like new employees. Because you're exactly right. Because when I started, I used to focus on like policies for certain things. If a customer is unhappy with their ice cream, here's our policy, here's a whatever. And I eventually got to a point of saying, actually, your job is to just make someone's day, right? If someone's coming in for ice cream, like that's all they want, right? And maybe if you're serving coffee, maybe it's a little different, right? But if you can simplify it into that, and that's the policy, right? And I don't really actually care if you followed some line by line procedure as long as that was the guiding thing. Like you're almost teaching people to think rather than just blindly follow a guide, right?
You said something so significant there, teaching people to think and lead with heart. Like one of the things that is so underutilized is put yourself in this person's shoes. And I'm not saying you're going to 100% understand what they're thinking and how they're feeling. But let's say that dinner rush, which is always crazy because people are leaving work. I don't have time to cook. Kids probably have softball, soccer, ballet, all the different things. I just need to get something on the plate so that I can get them fed and get them to the next thing. And then they get home and they realize their order is incorrect, or there's things missing, or some of it's cold, or you've got a picky eater and the only thing they will eat is this. And it's the one thing that's not in the bag. How would you think that someone is supposed to respond? So when you said make someone's day, that really just spoke not to my intellect, but to my heart. And like, how do I show up with my hands, with my eyes, with my ears? I see, I look, I hear, and then my hands responded. Like, how can I make someone's day better? And I think that's one of those things that is an unspoken rule that can actually impact your profits a lot more than people realize. You know, those numbers people who are like, I don't have time for the touchy feely stuff.
What's the
It
ROI on
doesn't have to
this?
be touchy feely, but it is something about creating a good experience. Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
totally.
Putting yourself in the shoes of another person that you mentioned is so important. And one thing we actually spoke about before, if you want to share a little bit about it, but the experience of the job seeker in the interview and some of the like teaching nuggets that you've made for franchisees in that scenario.
Yes. So thinking about, again, going back to that user experience, sometimes what happens is exactly what Derek mentioned earlier. People will go from a cashier, they're now becoming a manager. They're so proud of themselves. They're so excited they've grown. They may not have even realized that they've made it to this point in their career, that they realized that they could have made it. And what happens is then they start getting more responsibilities. They start getting some of those managerial responsibilities that they never thought they would have to deal with. So now they're hiring people, they're doing performance reviews, they're giving feedback. And some of these people were originally their peers, and some of them are just complete new strangers and new faces that they're coming into relationship with. And so, one thing that I was aware of is sometimes when people grow up in those roles, we don't actually teach them or train them how to be effective in those roles. We give them the checklist and we say, you're going to be great. Go do it. You're wonderful. Full faith in you. Instead of saying, hey, let's take a step back and let's actually walk you through this process. So, again, this kind of goes back to that point about onboarding. So, a manager's onboarding is going to look different than a customer services onboarding, right? But when you think about it, there are certain things that our labor laws and things will not allow you to ask. They are violations. Do we actually train and educate our hiring managers, not just our restaurant, above restaurant leaders, right? But actually the ones in the restaurant doing more hiring than anyone because we know those turnover rates are, woo, okay. So when we think about that, how are we actually training them? How are we preparing them and setting them up for success? So, with that, a friend and I, Stephanie Hess, she was on here before. We actually worked out to create some training materials. What questions can you and can you not ask? Then we even turned it into a series where we had a promising interview and then we had a coachable interview. And we broke it down in segments of, hey, you just asked if someone was married. Let's talk about why we probably don't want to ask those questions. Hey, you just asked if someone had a religious reason why they can't work on the weekends. Let's talk about why we probably shouldn't ask those questions. People can feel free to share, but this is why we're not going to ask. And that is also beneficial because it's risk mitigation for the business. So the legal department should really love you when you start doing these things as well. You're making friends all over.
Yeah, love it, love it. Yeah, and it's like there's this bubble, right? And I think I didn't learn myself like about some of these things until much later, like after I started hiring, and it was because I wanted to make sure I was doing it right. Like I went on my own and searched some of these things. I'm going to read the labor laws. I've heard some vague people have said that you're not allowed to ask this, but what does it actually say and what should I follow? In HR, especially, it's so easy to forget that people don't know those things, right? Because like you said, like they didn't come from that training and from that background. And I also think back to whether it's the ice cream store days or even more recently, right? You forget with managers, especially when they've been promoted within, that there should always be like a very different onboarding. It should be treated as if they're like a new hire. And I think like it goes almost back to that. Also teaching the thinking becomes even more important, right? Because you're not going to be able to be there overseeing them every day. Like they're going to make decisions. And if you haven't given them sort of the framework on how to make decisions, or whether it's like in a smaller, like a specific situation, like an interview, and some unexpected question comes up, or just on that day to day, right? If an employee says, I'm being discriminated against or something like that, right? If you don't give them the tools and the thinking around it, you can have some disastrous situations.
Yes. And as HR folks who not only do hiring, but also do investigations, I think about how businesses that are in the food industry, the restaurants tend to be a bit more casual, right? So conversations are a bit looser. Sometimes some of the standards are a little bit looser in terms of like, we can hang, we're more friends and things like that. But how do you make sure that you're protecting the business while also creating a good environment for everyone who walks through the door? And that includes your employees. Because sometimes we like to think, oh, I don't want to come down as a stickler or a micromanager. But that ambiguity can sometimes be so hurtful rather than actually creating some clear boundaries for the sandbox that we all have to share.
Yeah. I love that sort of thinking, right? Like sometimes it is useful. And a lot of the times if you've been in any managerial role, you often have people come to you and say, what do I do? What do I do in this situation? And sometimes they actually just want you to make the decision. They actually want to have something to look to. So like I feel 100% confident. And to your point, like anything where we're talking about HR that dabbles into legal liability, probably having some more clear if this then that kind of instructions,
Mhm.
right? Versus if we're talking about culture building or something more general, like maybe there's looser values or principles, but people can shape that, right?
That's true. Yes.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I would love to know, it goes back to where do people start with this? We do have, I think, some folks that will be listening to this who are like franchise owners, maybe in smaller franchises or things like that, where like they don't necessarily have or anything like that. And manager onboarding may be a totally new concept. So curious again, what would you advise them on? Like, where do you start? What are the most important things? You talked about creating some great things as far as good interview, bad interview type scenario, but maybe those kind of things like take a little more resources to put together. Like, what are some like quick wins or some opportunities that you see a lot that maybe you've seen in stores that where there's some real opportunities to just help support managers, help them
Mm.
up, level up and shape that thinking a little bit?
One thing that I think is underutilized for a manager is to have a support system. I
Mm.
think having, because as we talk about, managers have to do inventory, they have to do hiring, they have to do the drops or the money runs or different things like that. They have to do so many things. So as you're talking about onboarding and their time and working 70 hours sometimes a week, which feels just insane, getting them a team that is fully equipped to be able to support them so that they can then delegate, because this is a word that managers really don't do very well in the restaurant, delegate. When we did heart styles, oh my goodness. I remember we were doing it in some of our company owned stores down in Florida. And we were so excited. We're like, leave the titles at the door. We're just going to focus on you today because usually they don't have time to pull away from the restaurant and focus on themselves. So we're excited. We're making headway. And then during lunch break, the area coach texts 4 different RGMs and says, Rock or compliance is in the area. So one or all of those 4 stores could be getting checked out with no notice. And immediately we had to go into like triage mode because they're like, hey, I can't be here. I have to leave. I have to go to my store and I can't be here anymore. And I'm not focused. And one of the RGMs, I was talking to her and I said, listen, have you trained your team? Yes. Do they know what to do? Yes. Do they do it the same way that they do it when you're there and when you're not there? I hope so. I think so. I said, then take a deep breath. You're going to have to trust your team. And she was like, okay. But she was literally hyperventilating as she's talking to me. And I said, I need you to breathe. And she said, I am breathing. And I was like, okay, but you're not, though. So I need you to breathe because I tried to throw a little joke in there. My CPR is not up to snuff. You know what I'm saying? So I tried to throw a little joke in there so that she would laugh and calm down because we said, this is time for you all. We're going to dedicate that time. So when you start thinking about how we support managers, how do you get an ACE team around them? How do you support them with maybe someone who can have the onboarding captain role? So where they help with onboarding.
Ooh,
How do
love
you
that.
have like all these different roles? Because what also you're doing is cross training and upskilling your entire team. So
Mm.
let's say that one of the managers needs to go out on maternity leave or paternity leave and they're out for a while. That doesn't leave the whole team in chaos. That doesn't leave the leaders totally just stranded. You have a team that now you may need to flex and really upskill them a bit more, but also it helps build the confidence that these individual team members say, oh, yes, I can do that. I've been doing the onboarding captain. Certainly, I can take on this extra role for a few months or something like that. And you're also building your bench or succession planning for how you want to expand more stores or expand your capability. So never underestimate the power of building an A1 team
No kidding.
around your manager.
You just
Absolutely.
said
Yeah.
so many cool things there. I have never encountered, maybe a lot of restaurants do this, that I haven't had it come up or heard of. Kathleen, I don't know if you've encountered, but the idea of the onboarding captain, and now I'm thinking like in any given restaurant, there are these sort of like informal titles that give more responsibility. It's a show to that employee, like that I value you, that I trust you. But I think so often in restaurants, when I was running my store, I had a real challenge because I had a manager, a store manager, and then like shift supervisors. But the challenge was like, that's it. That's the only trajectory I have. And I could have some really great people, but I really only need one manager. So I don't know how to show those people, give those people more opportunities.
And
Yeah, so
utilize more of their skills. And then also, some people only see vertical growth, but what we're talking about here is also the breadth. If you talk about the
yeah.
lattice, if you will, not just the ladder,
Mm.
widening out their experience, filling out that experience. And then that really can go into more of those transferable skills and those transformative skills that you can take with you anywhere. Because it's not necessarily about being the onboarding captain as it is. It's about being able to speak to people. It's about being able to organize and administer this program. It's about being able to really lead and control the records and make sure that if they have a welcome kit, that it arrives on time and that someone's there to greet them when they walk through the restaurant doors. How many times do we overlook? We got an interview or a new employee starting and they just walk in and, hey, where do I go? I'm sorry, we're busy. Stand over there for a second. Or
Yeah.
get to work. We need you. Where were you 5 minutes ago? That's not the greatest experience for a first day employee. So let's not overlook the small things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it also gives team members it helps with retention because they come to work every day with something really important that they are in charge of. They're responsible for. It gives them more of a why to go to work every day rather than just a paycheck. And then they know they're helping their team, they're helping their manager, they're there for them. And I think that even relates to other industries as well. We're talking a lot about food service and restaurants, but I can see this in like trucking or manufacturing. Like I can see this translating to a lot of other industries as well.
Yes, because let's even talk about corporate America where you come in the first day, no one's meeting you at the security desk. You come in, your desk is cleared off. I still got to get your laptop. Can you
Right.
sit here for till lunch when I'm free and I'll shuffle you around? When we talk about that, again, that experience, that user experience, it doesn't just translate into how am I incorporating technology and virtual in this remote world to make sure that the experience is better for our users and our participants, but also how do we make a better experience for our customers? And even those employees who we want to stay with us long term. We hired them, we liked them enough. So how do we keep them around? How do we give them the best of us and not what's left?
No kidding. You're so right. Like, how many companies? I know so many friends that just recently started jobs, and they're like, yeah, the first week, I don't know, I came in and I had to get set up on payroll and filled out some forms, but I'm still waiting for the computer, and I'm not. IT's got a provision, and like that whole first week is just You've built someone up, they're excited to start a job, and then immediately met by I feel completely unproductive and in the way, and
And that
doing
first
nothing.
2 weeks, they're still judging you as a company, right? They're still deciding if they want this to be their long-term everyday job or career or just work is so much part of our lives and our beings nowadays. Do I want this as something I want to do every day?
I agree
Right.
with that because I think about like generational differences. If we go back to the boomer generation, you're privileged to be here. You're welcome.
Right.
Work really hard for that pension. You got it. But now think about how much that mindset of the average worker has changed after COVID. People were saying, I've given up a 6-figure job to be a bartender because that's what makes me happy, because that's what fills my cup. So if we know that people are not staying at jobs at 5 years any longer, why are we still operating with the same mindset and the same processes as we are 20 years ago? We have to be agile, just like the culture and the trends and things are agile now. And we need to be forward thinking and not just reactionary, how we always chasing and catching up. So that would be a big piece of encouragement of maybe instead of us waiting for the next trend to hit us, maybe we build the next trend. What excitement could that be?
Yeah. What more could we give them to have them fill their cup? Because every employer can provide that to their employee. It doesn't have to just be a job. And I think that takes a bit of personalization too, right? Getting to know your employees and know that Steve is numbers driven. And so if he's involved in the numbers, then he's gonna wake up every day and get excited. But Jody is a creative. So maybe if she takes over the social media, she's going to kill it and knock it out of the park. So, yeah, getting to know people. And I love what you mentioned of bringing, what did you say? Bringing more, creating the trends instead of just waiting for them to fall into your lap. Have you ever created a trend?
I'm currently trying to make fetch happen at work, so I'll keep you posted
Ugh.
on that. But actually, there was one time where I was asked to just update some documents at work. They were some onboarding documents for our field or restaurant employees. And I looked at the packet, I looked at the baggie that they put it in, and I said, oh my gosh, this is like 10 pieces of paper. Who does paper anymore? I do not want to print these pieces of paper. I don't have to worry about keeping them updated because this world changes frequently and quickly. I said, how can we like actually brainstorm a way to do this better in a way that's going to bring this to life and really connect with the people that we're more often hiring in this generation now? Took 10 pieces of paper, turned it into one trifold brochure with QR codes. And then as they were going through the onboarding, you follow along on the brochure. Each section would be a slide, if you will, of the onboarding. They could QR code, which means they could see our intranet, so they could read more about it. And then also, there was another QR code for them to join the KFC Foundation if they wanted to opt in there and see all the benefits that were available to them there. And then also learn about the different aspects of how to get their uniforms and their sizes and things. So, all of the critical things 10 pieces of paper down to one nicely decorated, wonderful, engaging brochure, and then created a coupon that says bring you and your crew, because not everyone has positive association with family. But KFC was founded like on that family meal, Sunday dinner type thing. So updated the language a little bit and just said bring you and your favorite people for an 8-piece bucket meal on us. Thank you for joining the team. So they got a coupon there that they could take to the restaurants. And then they also got to know about our benefits and things of part of being part of the organization. So we still kept the baggies. We still put all of that in there. And it was cheaper because you weren't printing all these pieces of paper. So I'm sure our franchisees at least appreciated that cost savings as well.
Oh,
True. Yeah. There's always a few in the crowd that are just going to look at every single penny that
Dollar.
you're spending, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
oh yeah, and as an employee, if I see a 10-page word printed document, I'm putting that down and saying, "I'll think about it later. I'll look at that later." If I see a fun, colorful brochure that gives me the opportunity to like pull up my phone and scan a QR code, I don't know. That's something I immediately want to play with.
It
Yeah.
makes it a little bit more interactive. So it's not me talking at you, it's us having a conversation.
Yeah. It's really, I love that it makes for a better experience. And to your point, like it allows you to make some of those resources more of a living resource. If you need to update it because it's digital, it's you're saving yourself a lot of work down the line rather than like having to reprint things and keep everything updated, et cetera. You also said something I think really valuable that actually tied together a bunch of things really nicely, but just that little bit about you and your crew and the thinking behind it was really powerful because I think it was a really good demonstration of putting yourself in the shoes of someone going through, in this case, like your onboarding training type of materials, and just identifying how impactful those couple words can be if you said you and your family and there's a bad association versus just making a small adaptation that is so much it's going to resonate with everyone rather than maybe being a negative experience for some people. I thought that was really powerful. I'm sure you have many of those. Any other example? I'm going to put you really on the spot. But I would love to know if there's any other examples that come to mind of just small wording changes like that. And it's totally okay if I'm very much putting you on the spot, but it's just such a cool thing to highlight.
I probably have more than I can reasonably say, because in the role of creating training, you end up creating resource documents, you end up creating one pagers, you end up creating a 30, 60, 90-day plan, you end up creating all of these supplemental and supportive documents. And one thing that I've realized is it's a little bit easier when we have a more casual and flexible working environment and culture. So I don't know if this will work at Goldman Sachs, but when you think about meeting people where they are and aligning with the culture, I have added in a lot more conversational tone into a lot of our documents. And when we're inviting people to things, making it feel more welcoming and welcoming to all people and adding in that language. So it was interesting. I was working with one of our communications partners just the other day, and he was like, okay, I've created this document, I've created this toolkit. It's really great. He said, but it needs some of you in it. And I was like, what does that mean? And he was like, it feels so technical. I need like your hey, yeah. And I was like, oh, okay. All right, pull it up. Let's talk about it. I was like, what is so being able to just even say we have these different groups that people can join and things like that, and saying join one or join them all, volunteer, just different things like that, where it feels more welcoming and inviting instead of saying this is a philanthropy opportunity and we would like you to volunteer and here's the date and time and information and please make sure that you sign up down below. Whereas, hey, bring a friend, you plus one, we've got a seat for both of you all. Like different like language like that, I think also helps people to not just breeze past it, but actually, oh, what is this? I want to learn more. And as we get inundated with written messaging all the time. So if it doesn't stand out in some unique way, the chances are that people are reading it rather than skimming to see if there was anything significant, probably missing a lot of the meat and then moving on to something else, you've already lost the majority of your audience. So how do you give them a hook? How do you capture their attention and then hold it so that you can get the outcome that you want?
Yeah, super spot on. And we mentioned starting the new trends, right? And I think what you just said, like thinking about how to make things more conversational and approachable is going to be even more important, especially now that we have all these AI tools, et cetera, right? So people who are interacting with whether it's ChatGPT or some chatbot that they don't know what's behind it or whatever, but it's becoming more personalized and it's becoming more tailored and casual in how it presents information because that's what's more effective. And so I think we're going to see a lot more of importance placed on that as well. Like any communication that we are creating, materials that we're creating, have to meet people at that same space.
Agreed. I'll share a quick story. So I was having a brainstorming meeting and I wanted people to come with ideas because you say, this is the topic and we're going to discuss it. And no one comes prepared. So then you spend 20 minutes in silence while people are thinking, wasted time. Oh my gosh. So I was like, hey, come with some questions and then we narrow it down as to the direction that we want to fit into. And if you want to submit the questions here on this email chain, sounds great. I will get it incorporated. So someone came back with questions and oh my gosh, oh, it was related to Women's History Month. That's probably helpful. So it was related to Women's History Month. We were going to have a panel discussion and I was like, come up with questions. That's what it was. And when we started having the conversation, I looked back at the emails and I said, oh, someone sent questions. And one of them was like, what is the percentage of female employees to, it just was something extremely technical and just convoluted. And I was like, I don't think people are going to want to hear the answer to that question. And then I read the next one and then I read the next one and they still felt disconnected. And so when we got on the call, I was just like, hey, thanks to everyone who submitted questions. Let's dig in a little bit and see what other things we could generate, get the juices flowing. And then when I said that, the person who wrote the email said, "Thank you. I actually just typed it into ChatGPT." And I was like, aha, now we understand why I didn't meet the brief. Okay. So always make sure that even if you're using your AI tools, that you plus it up, you review it to make sure that it's actually meeting the brief that was asked and that it's going to be impactful in the way that you intended it to. Yes, it can save you some thinking time, but I don't think it saves you 100%. Like you got to make sure that you look at it and review it.
Yeah. Oh, amazing show, which kind of like that kind of gift wrapped so many things we talked about through this, right? Teaching people how to think becoming way more important because we now have these input output machines, right? That will spit back exactly what you want to hear. And if you're not reviewing it and you're not actually thinking about, is this answer relevant or does it actually make sense in the context of what I asked it? We've got garbage in, garbage out. Of course, on the other side, these tools can be really powerful when used effectively. That is the double-edged sword of where we're headed. And to the other points about learning and training, and you talked about nuggets and all these other things, right? People even more than they already are going to start to expect instant answers, and they want because we're now training everyone that you can just ask anything. You can ask ChatGPT or these other bots like a question, and it's always going to tell you the answer, right?
It's always going to tell you the answer, but don't assume it's 100% correct. It's an answer. Let's say that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So interesting. Renee, maybe a great way to just like wrap things up. Any specific projects on your time horizon, like coming up, that you'd love to just that you're excited about that you'd speak to? Of course, maybe not some you're not allowed to speak to or anything like that, but anything that you're working on that you're excited by.
I am. So right now I'm in the process of rolling out global communities of belonging. And with that, we have global virtual fairs, first ever, hot off the presses. I don't even know how this is going to work, but we are in there. We are doing it. So we have executive sponsors from time zones and geographies all across the enterprise, which Yum Brands is global. And then we have different leaders who are going to speak to why they feel connected to this group. And the purpose is to boost awareness and also increase membership so that we're better able to support and connect our employees across the globe. So it's going to build community, it's going to build connection, it's going to build networks, it's going to build development opportunities. I am so gushing. All right. Yes. But in a nutshell, that's one of the things I'm very excited about.
Huge project. I'm sure, all of the things that you've done leading up to this, I think there's probably no one better to execute on this. But that does sound very exciting and huge undertaking, especially when you're global, right? All these like other language, cultural things you have to think about.
It was interesting because I was like, we're writing these comms, communications, and I don't know if this is going to translate culturally in Asia. So we did use ChatGPT to give us some pointers on how to tweak the languaging to see if it would translate a little bit more culturally friendly. So
Smart.
some interesting tools there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great use case of you had the thought, right? You weren't relying on the tool to think for you, but then using the tool to actually give that sort of very specific output. Great use case too. Nice. Cool. Renee, this was a fantastic conversation. I think Kathleen and I are gonna re-listen to it and then have 1,000 more questions that we would love to ask you.
This was
Probably
fun. Thank you.
thank you. We're so happy you came on. We'd love to have maybe another conversation as well. We could go deeper on some things, or since you're also thinking about what's ahead, how do we start the new trend? Maybe there's even one specific topic we can all tackle together. That'd be really cool. But thank you so much for your time today. You've been a lovely guest, and my brain is spinning. I'm not sure about you, Kathleen.
Yes. And good luck with the global rollout.
Thank you so much.
Thank
I
you.
just want to say thanks for reaching out to me and setting this up. It's been a pleasure. I didn't realize I had worked on so many things until I started breaking down the examples. So
It
it's been a
adds up.
pleasure.
Yeah, lovely. Awesome. Bye for now, Ronita. Thank you.
Hi, thank you.
Awesome.
Ronita is a wealth of knowledge. Wow.
So much interesting stuff there. And I feel like we really only scratched the surface.
Seriously. And I love the way, and this is like an aside to the content of what she spoke about, but I love the way she speaks about things, but then tells stories about them. So it speaks to the almost like as if a training document would, right? Like
Yeah, the learning, the
like
high level.
of it, the high level, and then breaks it down to like low level, like very concrete examples as well.
Yeah, agreed. And I assume that's got to be from the the years of looking at things from a training and learning and development lens, but also having been on the other side as well. So you recognize the need to identify something and then also have something that's relatable, like through the story. So yeah, agreed. And just so many interesting topics that we covered, but this often seems to happen to us, where they all end up coalescing and connecting really well. But more so than in any other conversation I think we've had, even it really wrapped around into some really interesting pieces. Because really, fundamentally, we're all just like learning animals. And so learning and development and all those pieces those are like the innate things. And so many different things branch off of that core piece. So that was that was a really cool conversation.
Amazing.
And now the question is, what is your shifting question? For those who haven't heard any episodes before, Kathleen and I like to leave every episode with some sort of prompting question that'll leave listeners with something to think about, but also something that's usually more geared towards action. And Kathleen, I'll put you on the spot. What is your shifting question?
Okay. My shifting question goes into the theme that Derek mentioned, like the HR bubble or blind spot, right? So, this idea that people outside of HR don't know what people inside of HR know. And we talked a bit about it with the managers and how they interview and the do's and don'ts and what to ask and what not to ask. So, I guess my question or challenge would be what how can you educate managers, either above restaurant managers or managers in any industry, on the HR stuff in a way that sticks or in a more, can't think of it,
Approachable.
approachable, yeah, maybe a more approachable way or more consistent way almost. And then for managers, I would challenge you to ask more, right? Ask more from HR. Can there more resources or support or understanding or knowledge of the reason behind any HR things.
Yeah, policies, rules, things like that. Yeah.
Tools. Yes, yes.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's a really good point because that is something that gets neglected when people are promoted into sort of managers. And that does dovetail into my shifting question as well. Not that I'm copying you, but people are going to have a lot of action items from this stuff. But I really wanted to ask the question of what is your manager onboarding and training focused on today? And are you teaching procedures or are you teaching thinking? Because
Mhm.
that's where it really starts to shift. Absolutely. When it's someone's first job at an entry level position, like a frontline position, sure, giving them a prescription of things to do it can be really helpful. Obviously, as Ronita mentioned, giving the why, et cetera, to help them understand why they're doing something is important. But then it almost shifts with a manager to the why has to be the driving force because ultimately they're the ones that are implementing your procedures, your policies, and often maybe tweaking them or understanding where a policy does or doesn't apply. And so that's my takeaway, something that I think I didn't think about enough in the past, which is how are you teaching and onboarding your managers to think the way you want them to think about your business?
I love that. That's a good one. A lot of good content from this episode for managers, right? I think we
Yeah,
said manager a lot.
very manager centric.
Yeah,
Agreed. Yeah.
absolutely. And I just want to preface that, like, we say manager, it could mean that could be different titles in different industries, right? It could be anything, but the idea of someone in charge, a leader at a
Yeah,
local.
any kind of leader. And it could apply to someone without maybe a formal title as a leader too. There's all kinds of organic leaders within any organization too. So love that. More to come. But for now, thanks for tuning in.
Goodbye.